June 28, 1914. A minor royal is shot in a city most Europeans couldn't find on a map. Nobody in London, Berlin, or St. Petersburg wants a continental war. Not one leader is planning to burn down the old order. 6 weeks later, millions of men are marching into the deadliest conflict humanity has ever seen. Here's the part nobody explains properly. It wasn't a villain. It wasn't one country's greed. Every major power was doing something completely rational, defending itself. Germany built an army to avoid being crushed between France and Russia. Russia mobilized to protect its allies. France prepared to avoid a repeat of 1871. Every single move was defensive on paper, and every single move looked like an attack to somebody else. That trap didn't die in 1914. It's sitting under Taiwan right now. It's sitting under NATO's eastern border. It's sitting under every headline about a Chinese naval buildup or a Russian troop movement. And almost nobody explains it correctly because most people are still arguing about the wrong question. Who's the good guy? Today we're going to show you the actual machine running underneath that argument and why it would produce the same rivalry no matter who's in charge. For most of the last century, there have been exactly 2 ways to explain why countries fight. Both of them are half right, and both of them are the reason so much commentary about global politics goes nowhere. The first is realism. Power is destiny. States exist in a world with no referee, so they arm up, they compete, and conflict is baked into the system. It's a bleak view, but it explains a lot. Why Russia annexed Crimea, why China is militarizing the South China Sea, why the United States invaded Iraq. Power, security, survival. The second is liberalism. Institutions can tame power. Trade, alliances, international law, the UN, the WTO, build enough of these structures and states will find cooperation more profitable than conflict. This explains the European Union, decades without war between major trading partners, a rules-based order that mostly held for 70 years. Here's the problem. Realism can't explain why the Cold War ended without a shot fired between the 2 superpowers. It can't explain the European Union at all. And liberalism can't explain why the UN Security Council freezes every time a great power's core interest is on the table, or why Germany and Britain traded heavily with each other for years and then marched into World War I anyway. Both theories are describing real forces. Neither one, on its own, tells you why a state that wants nothing but security keeps ending up in an arms race it never asked for. That gap is where the actual mechanism lives. And it's the part almost no explainer video touches because it's not a story about good states and bad states. It's a story about a trap built into the structure of the system itself. The concept is called the security dilemma. It was first laid out by a historian named John Hertz in 1950, and it's one of the most quietly devastating ideas in the study of international politics. Here's the mechanism. A state builds up its military, forms an alliance, or deploys forces forward, purely to protect itself. But because there's no world government to guarantee anyone's safety, other states can't verify that intention. All they can see is the capability, and capability looks the same whether it's meant for defense or attack. Look at NATO's presence in Eastern Europe after 2014. From NATO's side, this is textbook defense. Reassure vulnerable allies, deter further Russian aggression, nothing offensive about it. From Moscow's side, this is NATO hardware creeping toward St. Petersburg, exactly the encirclement Russian strategy has feared for generations. Both sides are telling the truth about their own intentions. Neither side can prove it to the other. That gap between what you know about yourself and what the other side can verify about you is the entire dilemma in one sentence. This gets worse in a world with 3 or more major powers instead of 2. During the Cold War, the US only had to watch the Soviet Union, and vice versa. Simple, almost stable. Today, China has to think about American forces in the Pacific, Indian forces on its disputed border, and a Russia that might get opportunistic if a Sino-American crisis erupts. Russia has to watch NATO in the West and China's growing footprint in Central Asia. The United States has to maintain enough capability to handle China or Russia while managing Iran and North Korea on the side. Every major power is building for worst-case scenarios involving multiple rivals at once, and those worst-case preparations look aggressive to everyone watching. Then there's the technology problem. A fighter jet can defend your airspace or strike another country's territory. A missile can shoot down an incoming threat or launch a first strike. Advanced naval forces can protect shipping lanes or blockade an island. Almost nothing in a modern arsenal signals its intention on its own. When China expands its navy, is that to protect its own coastline or to prepare for something else? Depending on who's answering, you get two completely different, completely sincere answers. There is no equipment in existence that settles the argument by itself. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The security dilemma requires no villain at all. It runs on states that are 100% telling the truth about wanting only to protect themselves. Go back to 1914 with that mechanism in your head, and the entire catastrophe suddenly makes sense in a way that an archduke got shot never could. Germany sat between France and Russia, and its war plan assumed it had to knock out France fast before Russia could fully mobilize. That plan wasn't drawn up by a madman. It was the rational output of a state that felt surrounded. France, having lost territory to Germany in 1871, rebuilt its army and locked in an alliance with Russia to guarantee it wouldn't happen again. Russia expanded its own forces to defend against Germany and Austria-Hungary and to protect Slavic populations in the Balkans. Every one of these moves was defensible. Every one of these moves terrified somebody else into a counter-move. When the crisis in Sarajevo hit, none of these governments had the flexibility left to step back, because the war plans and alliance commitments they'd built for their own safety had already locked them onto rails. Nobody in June 1914 wanted a 4-year bloodbath. The system produced one anyway. Now here's the part that should really land. Nuclear weapons were supposed to fix this. The logic seemed airtight. If a great power war means mutual annihilation, no rational leader would ever start one, so the security dilemma should lose its teeth. And to be fair, it has prevented a direct war between nuclear powers for 80 years. But it also created new versions of the same trap. Because both sides know direct war is catastrophic, they compete instead through capabilities that operate just below that threshold. Hypersonic missiles that cut warning time from 30 minutes to 5, cyber weapons that can be planted years in advance and activated without warning, AI-assisted systems that can act faster than a human can approve the decision. Every one of these technologies exists because a state wanted deterrence. Every one of them also compresses the amount of time a leader has to tell the difference between an accident and an attack. Look at the Taiwan Strait today. Chinese military buildup around Taiwan is framed in Beijing as defending a core interest against separatism and foreign interference. American forward presence in the region is framed in Washington as preserving a balance of power that prevents any single state from dominating the Indo-Pacific. Run those two positions through the security dilemma, and you don't need either side to be lying for tensions to keep escalating. You just need both of them to keep doing exactly what they're already doing. This is the piece that neither realism nor liberalism gets fully right. Realism assumes conflict is just baked into human nature or the system, full stop, nothing to be done. Liberalism assumes enough institutions and trade ties will eventually dissolve the problem. The security dilemma says something colder and more precise. This isn't about character, and it isn't something you can build your way out of with enough treaties. It's a structural feature of a world with no referee, and it will keep reproducing itself, in different costumes, in every era, until someone deliberately manages it. So what do you actually do with this the next time a headline shows up about a Chinese naval expansion, a Russian troop buildup, or a new American base agreement in the Pacific? Stop asking only, who's the aggressor here? That question assumes someone has to be lying about their intentions, and half the time nobody is. Ask a better question instead. What is each side's defensive logic, and how is that logic reading as a threat to the other side? That single shift in framing will make more of the news coherent to you than a year of cable news commentary, because it stops forcing every story into a hero and villain shape it doesn't actually have. It also changes what solving great power competition even means. You cannot argue your way out of a structural trap with enough goodwill, and you cannot eliminate it with enough institutions either. What you can do is manage it. Crisis communication channels, arms control on the most destabilizing capabilities, forces of restraint that signal defensive intent even when a fully aggressive posture would be cheaper. The Cold War is proof this is possible. 4 decades of the most intense rivalry in modern history, and the two superpowers never fired a shot at each other directly, because both sides eventually built mechanisms to keep the security dilemma from running away with them. That's the real takeaway. Great power competition isn't a morality play, and it isn't a permanent, unsolvable fact of nature either. It's a structural condition. Understanding the mechanism is what separates someone who can actually read the geopolitical chessboard from someone who's just picking a side and hoping. If this shift in how you read the news is useful to you, the mechanism we walked through today, the security dilemma, alliance politics, how deterrence actually holds or fails, is the entire spine of my book, How Great Powers Compete. It goes much deeper into how this plays out across the Indo-Pacific, Europe, and the regions in between. Links in the description. And if you want to go back to where this whole argument starts, why realism and liberalism each get half the picture, and where that leaves the field of international relations today. That's the foundation I lay out in Beyond Realism and Liberalism, the first book in this series. Also linked below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.